Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to discuss the Beatles' final recorded album, Abbey Road. Before I start, just a couple of things. First of all, I accidentally deleted my last video on the White Album, so I had to upload it again, so apologies for any inconvenience that caused. Secondly, I'm going to be doing a video this afternoon on Andrew Brooks's channel discussing George's album Brainwashed, so look out for that. His channel is called Andrew B. Should be up shortly after we record it. And then thirdly, quite exciting news, on Monday, Colin Pike and my friend Colin and I had a discussion with May Pang to discuss her new film, and it was a very interesting 25-minute discussion, and Colin is just about to launch his own YouTube channel, so that video is going to appear on his channel, and I think the channel is going to be called The Beatles Words of Wisdom, but I'll keep you posted on that as and when I have news. So on to Abbey Road. I'm going to try and say things which you may not have heard before, because there's an awful lot that's been said about this album, and I don't want to repeat things. And I did review this album several years ago now, but I did review it already. So what can we say? September 26, 1969, obviously released. When I did the White Album review, as soon as I said it, I kind of regretted saying it. I said, John is on better form on the White Album because on Abbey Road he's slightly overshadowed by Paul. And then people came back and said, what about Come Together? And obviously, if you look at it track by track, actually, John contributes some very strong material to Abbey Road. And not only Come Together, but I Want You, She's So Heavy, and Because on the second side, and some fairly significant contributions to the medley, although they tend to get a little bit overlooked. But Sun King, Mean Mr. Mustard and Polythene Pam are all worthy. So I think, as with many things, it's whichever album you listen to at the time is your favourite. So at the moment I'm into Abbey Road. A couple of weeks ago I was into the White Album, and so it goes on. On to the question, did they know it was going to be their last album? Well, we've had various people say retrospectively or with hindsight, yes, such as George Martin in the anthology, and also George Harrison in the anthology. Now, I'm not sure if that's the case. Certainly at the time, I think the situation was somewhat fluid. And in this book, Anthony Fawcett's One Day at a Time, we got this famous conversation from just before the album was released in September 69, where John's talking about equal space on the album and the problem is fitting all three songwriters plus Ringo onto an album. And he says, when we get into the studio, I don't care how we do it, but I don't want to think about equal time. I just want it known I'm allowed to put 4 songs on the album, whatever happens. I don't have to say, shall we do it now? Because I think we'll all get fed up in 3 weeks, or actually the album will be full. Because actually we did 2 of Paul's last week, or 1 of Ringo's, or 1 of George's, or whatever, and well, it's too late now, next album. Meaning, you know, the hypothetical follow-up to Abbey Road, which never happens. And then he talks about, it seemed mad for us to put a song on an album that nobody really dug, including the guy who wrote it, just because it was going to be popular. Because the LP doesn't have to be like that. Wouldn't it be better, because we didn't really dig them, you know, but for you to do the songs you dug, and Obla-Dee, Obla-Da and Maxwell to be given to people who like music like that, you know, like Mary, or whoever it is needs a song. Why don't you give them to them? The only time we need anything vaguely near that quality is for a single. For an album, we could just do only stuff that we really dug. So this is very interesting, because it's John discussing the ongoing problems within the Beatles camp and how to resolve them. Not a word about the split, although a few days after that meeting he did announce the split to the Beatles, although it was kept secret for 9 months. So it was never cut and dried, in my opinion. Anyway, back to the album. Well, Come Together is just an outstanding Lennon song, and he said it was one of my favourite Beatles songs, and then he qualified that and said one of my favourite Lennon songs, let's put it that way. He dug the way the band backed him on this track, Paul's bass, Paul's swampy piano, George's guitar, Ringo's drumming. It's all first class. And although Paul said he was too frightened to ask John to sing harmony vocal on this track, he did actually sing harmony vocal on this track. So it's a little bit strange, that interview which he gave. I can't remember when it was, but he was saying, you know, I think John would have liked me to have sung harmony on that track, but I was too afraid to ask him. Well, here he is on the track, singing a fifth below the note that Lennon's singing, on not on every line, but on quite a few lines of the verse. I think it works very well. Obviously, we know that George Harrison came to complete fruition on this album, although I would make the case that his breakthrough had already been the previous year on the White Album. But obviously on this album we've got two solid gold songs, Something and Here Comes the Sun, and Here Comes the Sun is no less the most popular song on Spotify by quite a distance, for what that means. Something released as a single, quite unusual to release a single off an album already released in the UK anyway, but it did get to number 4 in the UK and all the way to number 1 in the US. So this album often divides opinion in terms of, you know, not everyone likes every track, and John said the same. You know, I like, with all the Beatles albums, you know, I like some of it and I don't like other bit. I've never been into a whole album. I think he said the only 2 albums he'd ever got into the whole way through were one of Carl Perkins' first albums and one of Elvis's, I think it was. So which brings us to the song Maxwell Silver Hammer. Well, this divides opinion like virtually no other song. And I remember when I first got into it, the Beatles in the late 70s, this was no less, probably in my top 3 favourites on the album, and I still love it to this day. I was listening to it the other day. Great innovation in the sound, in the use of the Moog synthesizer and the bass, which they spent a long time on, sounding like a tuba, with the short notes, and a bit of debate going on about whether, I think George was playing the bass throughout all the run-throughs, and then Paul may have overdubbed it for the final recorded version, but the jury's out on that one, as it seems to be out on who plays the Moog, because George brought the Moog synthesizer into the studio, but did he actually play it, or did Paul play the Moog on that track? And there was the debate about you're supposedly only able to play one note at a time on the Moog, and you've got certain sections of Maxwell where it's 3 notes happening at once, so it's probably a bit of overdubbing going on there. Anyway, Maxwell I find a really interesting and highly melodic track with a wacky lyric. People criticise the lyrics, but it's in the spirit of kind of, you know, fairy tales, Dr. Seuss, you know, cut off your head, Alice in Wonderland kind of thing. And in the spirit of that, I remember my parents bought this album soon after it came out, and my mother, so this album is not loved by everyone, unfortunately, and my mother said she found it quite precious, which is a bit of a dig. Maybe she wasn't happy with the lyrics to Maxwell, because her first name is Joan, and as you know, Maxwell opens with Joan was studied pataphysical science in the home, and then she gets killed by Maxwell, so she probably wasn't too impressed with that. Anyway, I'm a fan of Maxwell, sorry if you're not, because on side 2, again, I read one top 20 worst Beatles songs, and they said it's a toss-up between this and Sun King for one of the places. And I was thinking, what? Okay, Something is nothing mesmerising, but because not only the musicianship, because it's kind of very similar to Moonlight Sonata. I played Moonlight Sonata last night by Beethoven. I don't think it sounds like Moonlight Sonata backwards, but it's got those arpeggios all the way through the song, which is very reminiscent of that Beethoven work. But the main joy of this song is probably in the 3-part harmony, and George, when he was interviewed by David Wigg, said it was his favourite track on the album, just because they haven't done something like that since Yes It Is, which is the B-side of Help back in 65. Now, people obviously talk about the medley as being the highlight of the album. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but it's obviously takes up a good chunk of side 2 and is just very well worked together, because if you listen to a track like Mean Mr. Mustard or Polythene Pam on the Isha demos, they're nothing special, nothing to write home about, but when they're weaved into this tapestry of magic on side 2 of Abbey Road, it really works, and you never give them your money is reprised towards the end, And, John was a bit uncharitable in the Playboy interview, saying, "You Never Give Me Your Money" is not a proper song. It's just little bits weaved together. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, and John had done that exactly the same thing on the track "Happiness Is a Warm Gun" to great effect as well. But Paul was on a roll, to put it mildly, with "She Came In Through the Bathroom Window," "Golden Slumbers," and George Harrison is very complimentary. When he's asked about Abbey Road and his favourite tracks, after mentioning "Because," he says, "I like lots of them. You Never Give Me Money," "Golden Slumbers," and Paul always writes nice melodies. In fact, I don't know where he finds them half the time. He's amazing for doing that. So that was nice to hear. What can you say? And then the guitar solo, when they take it in turns to play the solo one after the other, from what we can gather, put down in one take, if you can believe it. So wonderful. Not often that would happen. I don't think a band nail something like that in one take. I think the backing track took a while to get correct, but the actual, when they laid down the solo, it was in one take. So got a couple of copies of Abbey Road to show you. We got this French copy here, which is interesting because on the label it doesn't say the end. It says ending and stroke Her Majesty, and which is quite unbelievable. They'd got the name of the track wrong. Also, the track "Oh Darling" on the record itself is "Oh Darling" without the exclamation mark after the O and without the G on "darling," which I thought was quite a strange oversight. And then we've got this Indian copy, which is not in good condition, and the guy in the local record shop basically gave it to me because it's so scratched. But this is interesting because they even miss out, can't read, that's too small, but they miss out the end completely, and they just go from carry that weight to Her Majesty, and Her Majesty is in a slightly different font. So I think they probably added that later. Then someone probably said, "Oh, you've left out Her Majesty," and so they kind of corrected it. But they ended up missing the end because maybe they thought the end wasn't a proper song title. Just want to show you the back cover of this is quite interesting because I'd never noticed, don't know if you had, I never noticed the top of the wall here, and also at the bottom you can see a little bit of pavement, which is actually missing from the Indian copy because the Indian copy is a bit cropped, so you can't see the pavement at the bottom. But if you compare the two covers, that this one has slightly more detail at the bottom with the pavement. No, it's just a small detail, but I thought I'd mention also the little bit of drain here at the bottom is not visible on the Indian copy. So all these minutiae which fans love to point out. And then my son has this picture sleeve of Abbey Road, which I think is very nice because they've got rid of the Beatles on Abbey Road and just called it, just take a picture of the original. This is the original picture that Ian McMillan took just up the road from the crossing. And then he superimposed the word Beatles on top of that, but this is the original picture. And then just lovely to have this on picture disc. I would have picked it up myself, but you know how much they're charging for picture discs. It's a little bit overpriced in my opinion. What else have we got to show you? A couple of quotes relating to this album. Well, we got John. We all know that he didn't like Maxwell Silverhammer, but like "Oh Darling," it's very interesting because "Oh Darling" was a great one of Paul's that he didn't sing too well. I always thought I could have done it better. It was more my style than his. He wrote it, so what the hell, he's going to sing it. If he'd had any sense, he should have let me sing it, brackets laughing. I think it's superb. She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. That's Paul's song. He wrote that when we were in New York announcing Apple and when we first met Linda. Maybe she's the one who came in the window. I don't know. Somebody came in the window. And then when he's talking about the end, he said, that's Paul again, the unfinished song, right? We're on Abbey Road, just a piece at the end. He had a line in it singing, and in the end, the love you get is equal to the love you give, which is obviously a slight misquote, which is a very cosmic philosophical line, which again proves that if he wants to, he can think. So I think it was nice of John to say a few nice things in that Playboy interview, sort of made up for some of the earlier interviews. the Tittenhurst Park 22nd August 69 is used to promote the single Something in this. This is taken from Neville Stannard's book. And obviously that was on the Hey Jude album, which came out in February 1970, pictures from that session. But if you look at the contemporary press at the time, they were using pictures from that last Beatles photo session to promote the album. And I just want to finish off by showing you a couple of songs from this superb book from Linda, which came out in 77, called Linda's Pictures, which I did have years ago and I had to re-buy it because I lost it. It's just got some of my favourite portraits of the Beatles from this era. So this is the famous 69 portrait from, I think it was April, taken inside, and just a wonderful picture of the Fab Four there towards the end of their career. And then I really love this one, sitting on the steps of Abbey Road on the day they shot the album cover. They're just killing some time, waiting for the cameraman to set up his camera on the crossing. And I've always loved that picture. 8th of August 69, and then this one of the Fab Four looking out the window. I think it was of Paul's house in Cavendish Avenue around about the time of Ballad of John and Yoko, to promote the song Ballad of John and Yoko's obviously in the picture there, which is fairly unusual. You won't see that too often. So to promote this album, I've never heard the Ringo interview, but Ringo, George and John all did a track-by-track analysis for various radio stations, and you can check out at least the George and the John ones are available on YouTube. If you just type in 1969 Abbey Road interview John Lennon, it'll probably come up. And then David Wigg from the Daily Express newspaper was also doing some interviews for a program called Seen and Heard from Radio 1, and he interviewed all four Beatles around the time, and he certainly asked Paul and George, what's your favourite tracks? And I've mentioned what George said. Paul said Come Together, and he said he liked Because as well, and he likes the whole of the long one, referring to the melody. What else have we got? Keith Badman in another one of his excellent indisposable books of his, the one with the foreword from no less than Hunter Davis. There's a little quote from John taken from the Jan Wenner interview, talking about the end. There's a nice little bit I played. They had it on the back of Abbey Road. Paul gave us each a piece. There's a little break where Paul plays, George plays, and I play. One of those where it stops, where it suddenly goes boom, boom, boom on the drums, and then we all take it in turns to play. I'm the third one on that. I have a definitive style of playing. I always had. They call George the invisible singer. Well, I'm the invisible guitarist. Well said, John. So I just want to say, Abbey Road is about the perfect swan song any group could bow out with. And I can't really think of any other group who quit while they were on top, quite in the same way as the Beatles. There might be a couple of bands that came close, but after an incredibly productive 7 years in the studio, they called it a day. And all of us fans are guilty of, as the next man, of sort of speculating on how it would have turned out if they'd stayed together and which tracks would have been Beatles songs, and I enjoy those videos and those discussions. But at the end of the day, I think deep down, I, for one, are quite glad that they called it a day when they did, because the 60s were coming to an end. They realised that the Beatles belonged to the 60s. The 70s was a time to stretch out on their own, see what they could do individually, and they proved to be more than capable in that respect. So that was Abbey Road. I'll just finish by showing you the famous cover again, of course. Timeless cover taken in St John's Wood, London, outside the EMI studios, which have now ever since been called Abbey Road Studios, but at the time they were just known as EMI. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.